turn to Acts chapter 16, and we're going to jump in at verse 13. And we're just going to share a little bit around the story. It's a missionary trip. We've got Paul and Silas. They've headed in and they've been directed by the Lord into this landing in Europe in this place called Philippi to share the gospel message. It's the gospel in action, the power of the gospel being released that we see taking place. And they are coming to see churches planted, lives transformed, people saved, people delivered. All of these things have been taking place, leading them to this place. The ministry, in a sense, had been hugely fruitful and successful, but we see a sudden turn of events. We see them find themselves in a moment where they're caught up in something that would be an incredibly hostile situation. And sometimes we too, here today, find ourselves in that moment. And so I'm wanting us to see what happens when you and I praise God, no matter the circumstances around us. You see, when you look at that word circumstance, it means to be circled. It means to be surrounded. It means that there's that which is pressing in upon you. That's what the first part, circum, means if you look at it in the Latin. But the second part is what I want to encourage us, circumstance. How is your stance in the midst of those moments? What position are you taking? How are you posturing yourself? What is your body position? How is your attitude? What is your bearing in the midst of those moments? And we see something about Paul and Silas being reflected as they surrounded of a stance. Because if you want to check your watches, just see what time did George start. Let's make sure he doesn't share overtime. I don't know what time your watches tell you it is. But we're going to see Paul and Silas in a midnight moment. And sometimes emotionally, spiritually, it doesn't matter what time of day it is, doesn't matter if the sun's shining, we are in a midnight moment. It's dark, it's scary, we feel isolated, we feel alone, we cannot see the person who's near us. What do you do? What do I do? How do we respond in the midst of that? And we see it being outworked in this chapter, Acts 16, verse 13. On the Sabbath, talking about Paul and Silas, we went outside the city gate to the river, where we expected to find a place of prayer. We sat down and we began to speak to the woman who gathered there. One of those listening was a woman from the city of Thyatira named Lydia, and she was a dealer in purple cloth. She was a worshiper of God. And the Lord opened her heart to respond to Paul's message. He's preaching Jesus. And when she and the members of her household were baptized, she invited us to her home and said, "If you consider me a believer in the Lord," she had had this incredible moment where she believed, where she's been baptized. She said, "Come and stay at my house," and she persuaded us. Verse 16. So once when we were, and verse 16, it continues to unfold what's taking place. Once we were going to the place of prayer, and we were met by, this is another lady they meet, by a female slave. They actually would have said she was in her early teens. We were met by a female slave who had a spirit by which she predicted the future. Other versions, your version might say she had a spirit of divination. Other versions would say because of the spirit they were coming up against, she had a spirit of Python. Have you heard that mentioned before? If you're wanting to find out a little bit more about that, tonight I'm going to be speaking into the same moment from a different angle, and we're going to be looking at what happens in the midst of prisons, amongst pythons, and in the midnight hour. So how do you handle yourself in those moments? Today we're just going through a bit of the story, but tonight we're going to look at how we handle those moments. And so there was a spirit of Python. And you know what a python does, just to give you an indicator? It's something that coils around you. It doesn't attack you outright to bite you with venom, but it rather coils around you. It squeezes you. So every time you take a breath, it gets tighter till you find yourself in the place that you are weary, that you feel defeated, that you feel hopeless, that you cut off from the life of God, the breath of the Spirit. You find yourself in the midst of those moments. That's what that sort of spirit does when it gets a hold of you. And she earned a great deal of money for her owners by fortune telling. She followed Paul and the rest of us shouting, "These men are servants of the Most High God who are telling you the way to be saved." She kept this up for many days. And finally, Paul became so annoyed that he turned around and he said to the spirit, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to come out of her." And at that moment, the spirit left her. When her owners realized that their hope of making money was gone, they seized Paul and Silas. They dragged them to the marketplace to face the authorities. And we know they're outworking as they're going to be thrown in prison. I want to jump back. This is something that was shared in and around the conference we went into at Dubai. The pastor was sharing on this same passage the morning that we arrived there. Getting off the platform, the officials came to close down the services. The Emirati officials saying, you cannot do this. It was amazing to see how the church responded in a moment of persecution, because they continued to move the whole conference, work through the midnight hour to see the conference move so that the gospel could continue to go out. And they started the conference the next morning with this song, "This is how we fight our battles." We fight with praise. We're still praying for them now in the midst of having it outworked. But sometimes God allows us to go through these situations that can seem trying. But He's not allowing you to go through them for your destruction, but He's allowing you to go through them. They're not a setup, but they're a moment to step up into a moment of destiny. We see this in Judges 3, verse 1 and 2, where God allowed Israel to be in the midst of hostile nations, and He did it for a reason. It says here, if you read there, that in the commentary, He did this to teach warfare to a generation who had not had a previous battle experience. The Lord is wanting there to be something in you and me of that posture, that stance, that bearing in the midst of that which is circling and surrounding us, that shows that we are a warring people, because our God is the God of the hosts of heaven. He is a mighty warrior. And He doesn't want you and me to live as doormats, but He wants us to exercise the authority that has been bought and brought through the cross, through Jesus, and to live in that victory and that triumph. He doesn't put us in a situation, if He sent that to us, if He sent that trial to us to wipe us out, He wouldn't expect us to be victorious. But He says He leads us in triumphal procession. Whatever He leads you into, He's wanting to see you overcome, have victory in, and triumph over. That's how He leads us. And it's the same in the physical. You don't gain muscle without some resistance training. I know this. You don't lose weight without some cardio. And it's painful. You've got to get your heart rate going. You've got to get your muscles moving. You've got to face those trials, those hardships, those things that stretch your lung capacity so that you can be equipped and enabled to be victorious and be the overcomer and be those that are led forth in triumphal procession. And so this is what's happening with Paul and Silas. They're preaching the gospel. It's amazing. They see this woman called Lydia get saved. She's a woman of wealth. She's a woman of influence. She's a dealer in purple cloth, which was for royalty. She's a mover and a shaker in the society. She's got a household where she is the key breadwinner. She says, I want to invite you to my household. She's got standing in the community. You know, she is someone who could have said, I don't need God. I've got money. I've got success. I've got influence. I've got standing. I've got everything. Why would I need Jesus? Yet in the midst of having everything, she acknowledges her need for Jesus. I love that. The Bible just shows us that it doesn't matter if you're the up and outs or the down and outs, you can still be out, and you need to be brought into the kingdom, out of darkness into light. That's the power of the gospel. And so we see this contrast between Lydia, this older woman who has influence, who has stature, who has finance, and then it's contrasted with the slave girl. She is someone who is not free in her own right. She is owned, and if people don't see her with value, they don't see her in terms of who she is as a person. They see her as a means for income. And so they are sending her out, and they're forcing her to operate and to fortune tell and to do all these things. And it says here, Paul and Silas, that when they are amongst her, what she's declaring over them, when we look at it, it's very true. She's saying, these men are servants of the Most High God who are telling you the way to be saved. What she was saying wasn't wrong, but where it was coming from was the wrong place. Rich has been encouraging us to guard our hearts, to see our hearts. You know, we can be in a church environment. We can say the right things. We can sing the right songs. We can know the right actions. You know, in worship, let's do the rock the baby. Let's do the put in the light bulbs. You can know the posture, the action to take. It's a good video clip on YouTube. You can look it up. But we can know all these things, but what's happening in your heart? Where's these things coming from? What's the motivation? What's the posture of your affection, as Rich encouraged us with earlier? What's taking place there? And Paul is getting annoyed because this girl is declaring these things, the slave girl. But I want to say, if you look there, often you might think he's annoyed with this girl, but it says he's annoyed with the Spirit. I want to say he is deeply concerned for this young lady. He has just seen Lydia come to the Lord. He's a man on a mission with a purpose and a mandate. He's here to bring the gospel, to see lives transformed. It's not just for the wealthy and the rich. It's for those that are poor and struggling as well. It's to bring everyone into the freedom of knowing Christ, because we're all in bondage if we don't. And so he's looking for this moment. It's been days, and he's been thinking, are her employers driving her to this? Is it the spirit of Python that's operated? Where is the right moment? And the moment arrives when he can bring her into freedom. And so he rebukes the spirit, and it says, finally, he became so annoyed that he turned around and said to the spirit, in the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to come out of her. And at that moment, the spirit left her. And it's such a beautiful moment to see this young lady come into freedom. You don't see it mentioned afterwards. But I believe that she came into a place where her life was filled with the presence of God. Because Paul was a man who knew Jesus' words, and he knew that if you cast out a demon, it will go and look for a place to rest, and if it cannot find that place to rest, it'll return, and if it finds the house unoccupied, it'll bring 7 more with it. And Paul wasn't in the moment to give spirits more space. He was there to take on and get rid of the spirit of Python, to remove that restriction so that she could have breath and life and oxygen and the breath of God, the Holy Spirit, occupying who she was. So we see the power of the gospel reaching a woman of stature and a slave girl. The gospel reaches those that are older and those that are younger. The gospel reaches those who are wealthy and those who have nothing. Doesn't matter who you are, what you have, where you are. The gospel has the ability to reach you, to bring you out of darkness and to position you in his marvelous light. That's what the gospel does. And we can spend our entire lives trying to accumulate wealth that is only of earthly value, and investing nothing into the kingdom and those things which are of eternal value. And here the gospel is unfolding. And we look and we see Paul and Silas's ministry. You know, they think, hey, we're hitting it. Everything's going great. We've reached the influences in society. We've reached, in mercy, the broken in society. We've seen churches being planted as we've journeyed here. We've seen people come into deliverance. We've seen people being saved. We've seen leaders raised up. Ministry is going wonderfully. They've just established the breaking into Europe of the gospel. They're thinking, this is great, but then something shifts and changes. Have you ever felt, and I've felt it probably like 4 times in just the last week, everything is great, it cannot get any better than this. Then in a moment it shifts and you think, how do I get out of this place? And yes, I am referring to the pressure you put on me. No, I'm joking. Nothing to do with that. But have you ever experienced how things can turn in a moment, where everything might look golden and the next moment you're in midnight? How did it change so quickly? And this is what they find happening here. The slave girl's owners have lost their hope of making money. You know, people react when you touch their wealth. And so they seize Paul and Silas and they drag them into the marketplace to face the authorities. And they bring them before the magistrates, verse 20. And they say, these men are Jews and are throwing our city into an uproar by advocating customs unlawful for us Romans to accept or practice. They bring Paul and Silas before the magistrates, and it's an amazing thing. It's something we face today. They hit them in the area of race. They hit them in the area of being Jews. They hit them in this area of racism. You know, you could come into a setting and say, these people are just Europeans. These people are just Indians. These people are just Africans. These people are just, that's what's happening in this moment. That's what they're being judged in. They're touching nationality, status, the color of their skin. These things are being picked on. We find it happening in our nation as well. And maybe you've experienced those moments where you've been falsely accused. You've been looked down upon. You've experienced, because of your background, because of the money you have or don't have, that you are treated unfairly. It's something as a nation we need to be believing for the redemptive, restorative work of God to do something here and change it for His glory. And we are the ones who get to carry that out, because it says in Galatians 3 verse 26 that we are all children of God through faith. For all of you who are baptized into Christ have clothed yourself with Christ. There is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female, for you are all one in Christ. Jew or Gentile speaks of nationality, slave or free speaks of status, male or female speaks of gender. And we've seen more persecution through the ages on those things, including in the church, than on anything else. And we need to be modeling the difference, because we here today, you are a peculiar people. You are a royal priesthood. You are a holy nation. You right now at this moment in Durban, South Africa, are a chosen generation. You get to proclaim something of His excellencies to bring people out of darkness into the light to know who they are as men and women of God, regardless of nationality, status, or gender. But as kingdom men and kingdom women. These men are Jews. Look what they are doing. And the crowd joined in the attack against Paul and Silas. Crowds do that. Just get onto Facebook. And the magistrates ordered them to be stripped and beaten with rods. And they had been severely flogged. They were thrown into prison. The jailer was commanded to guard them carefully. Maybe you haven't been stripped naked, but you felt stripped in terms of your confidence, in terms of your self-worth, in terms of your possessions, in terms of your health. Maybe you haven't been beaten with rods, but you've been beaten by thoughts and doubts and words and judgments and habits and addictions. They've been beating you. Maybe you felt severely flogged by those things. Maybe you haven't been guarded by a Roman centurion or guard or a jailer put outside you, but there's been jailers around your heart trying to stop you from moving and allowing the purposes of God to carry you through into that which He has destined for you. Maybe you felt those things taking place, even as we're looking at this story. And it says of this guard who was entrusted to look after them carefully, verse 24, when he received these orders, he put them in the inner cell and he fastened their feet in stocks. Notice, nowhere was he told to put them in the inner cell or to put their feet in stocks. When you look at this, the jailer, often the jailers were retired military men. They were hardened, they were seasoned, they had that regimentedness of being in an army that ruled and reigned and took ground through fear. And so often these people, as you would know, if some of you have been on the forefront, or you can just hear in terms of what's happening with soldiers in the US, they're suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. That means you can take them out the battle, but the battle is still internally waging, and they feel like they're living in that moment. And here before him are those that he would perceive to be enemies. And he says, I'm going to take careful care of them. And they've been whipped, and they've been beaten, and they've been flogged. And he says, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take them and put them in the inner cell. Now, the inner cell was a lower place. It was a place within the prison that was for the worst of criminals. It's there that you would get those that were unfit to be with the regular prisoners that were there. It's the worst of the worst. It was underground, it was deep, it was dark, it was dank, it was a dungeon-like experience. They say that the human waste from the rest of the prison, they didn't have great sanitary provision in there or lavatories. The human waste would slide down, sink down in the prison to the inner cell, to the deepest place, to that dark dungeon where these guys were finding themselves in. And here are Paul and Silas. They're in the inner cell. Their feet are in stocks. The stocks had multiple holes in them so that they could be contorted and put in different positions. It would be so painful that you wouldn't be able to fully stand, but you wouldn't be able to sit because it would break your ankles. Dark, smelling. It's a dungeon. Couldn't even stand up straight. What a turn of events. Paul and Silas would probably say, hey, you know what? Everything was going so well. The ministry was going. There were people giving their lives. I was seeing salvation. I was seeing deliverance. I was seeing all of these things. Paul and Silas might have been said. But all of a sudden, for no reason that we can attribute, we thought that our hearts were fully after God. We thought that we were walking with integrity. We thought that we were walking in a way that was bringing Him glory. But all of a sudden, we were stripped naked in front of the very people we were preaching to. We were beaten and beaten and beaten. And when we felt we couldn't be beaten anymore, that we never had oxygen to breathe because of the pain that we were experiencing, then they sent us to prison. And this jailer comes who's got a hatred towards us, and he puts us in the inner place, the worst place, amongst the waste and all that takes place there. And he puts us in stocks. What time is it? It's getting close to the midnight hour. And you see, they had delivered a girl from the spirit of Python. But that same spirit was trying to get hold of them in that moment. Was trying to take their breath away. Was trying to cause them to be helpless. Trying to make them to feel hopeless. Trying to feel like I just cannot draw oxygen. Trying to make them feel like they are cut off from the presence of God, the breath of God, the Spirit of God, the life of God. So much so that they would complain. So much so that they would know that they were in a prison in a dark place. So much so that God was a far and a distant thought. What do you do in the midnight hour, in the midst of the prison, with the python coming at you? What do you do in the midst of that moment, when everything is circling around you and surrounding you? What stance are you taking? Because Paul and Silas start to take a stance in the midst of that moment. Can I have the mic? Sean, I'm going to get you up with me in just a moment. I don't know if you're going to be Paul yet or Silas, but you're going to be one of them. Because I want to say this, midnight is the place. What is midnight? It's the place between 2 days. It's that place, it's that moment between yesterday and tomorrow. It's the place of transition. So often we're wanting change. It's easy to believe God for change because it can happen instantly and it's easy to walk it out. But I want to say transition is often process. It's a process of renewing your mind. It's a process of being healed. It's a process of being delivered. It's a process of learning how to walk as a man and a woman of God, no matter what situation and circumstance you find yourself in, because you know no matter what's facing me, I'm called in Him to overcome. I'm called to be victorious. I'm called to be one who triumphs. So I do not think because of my performance, God is judging me and putting me in a prison. I know that it's a setup for a step up into destiny, not destruction. And I start to position myself and take that stance. And so when that spirit comes, well, let me say this. Hebrews says that through faith and patience we inherit the promises of God. Can I encourage you here today? Some of us are thinking it's just by faith. But I want to say, where you find yourself and what you're going through, it's through faith and patience that we inherit the promises of God. I'm not talking about passively waiting for God to do something. I'm talking about that faithful patience. Hear this, it's for someone today. Faithful patience is actively believing for the manifestation of God's promise against all the odds, regardless of how long it takes. That's what the commentary says. Faithful patience is actively believing for the manifestation of God's promise against all the odds, regardless of how long it takes. And it's about midnight. You know, Michael Jackson has a song called Thriller. And he sings, it's close to midnight. And I'm not going to sing it because it's a different sort of midnight moment. It's about midnight, and Paul and Silas were praying, and they're singing hymns, they're singing praises to God. And the other prisoners are listening to them. They're watching. If you listen in the commentary, it says they attentively are inclining their ear to hear that which is happening. Because they've heard many people praying in the prison, Lord, if you will save me. Lord, if you'll step into this moment, if you'll turn the situation and give me freedom, I'm going to give you all my money. I'm going to follow you. I will even become a preacher and a missionary. He doesn't want you to choose that as an alternative. He wants you to know it's a high calling. And so in the midst of this moment, they've heard people praying before, but they haven't heard people pray like this in this prison. They haven't heard people praise like this in this prison. They haven't heard people sing like this before in the inner cell, in stocks, after being beaten and whipped. Sean, why don't you join me? You start, bud. You be Paul. I'll be Silas. Go for it. This is what they start to hear. These sort of songs. It's not songs like, I'm feeling warm and fuzzy and I need you to cuddle me in the midst of the moment. They start to sing songs that glorify God. Because in the midst of this moment, they're not looking at what they can get from Him. They're caught up with His worthiness. They're worshiping for who He is. But I want to say worship is transactional. You can't worship Him for who He is without getting all of who He is. So we worship Him as the King of glory, and He comes as the King of glory. We worship Him as the one who sets free and delivers and heals, and He comes as the one who sets free, heals, and delivers. And this is how they start to sing. Won't you sing? We sang it today. I didn't know we were going to sing it. You be Paul singing to me, I'm Silas. We're in the prison. Get the picture. It's dark. Yeah. It's dank. Okay. It's a little bit smelly. You can't see them, so it's fine.
Okay. Cool. And amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
It's a different sound.
That saved a wretch like me.
Prisoners are listening.
I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed.
And now Silas wants to get in on the act. He doesn't know the tune. He's heard it for the first time, probably that morning like me, but there's something in him that wants to start to sing. And he starts to sing, my chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me. And like a flood, His mercy reigns. It's unending love. It's amazing grace. So something starts to happen in the midnight hour. Can we stand up? Can we give some midnight hour praise? Take a moment. Take 10 seconds. Lord, we give you glory. We say you're worthy of praise. We say that your grace is amazing, that it can set prisoners free. And we thank you for your release in this place, because we are not talking informationally, but there's transformation happening. And I want to say, you know what happens? It's like a sucker punch to that spirit of Python. It's been hanging around. It's been trying to drive the wind out, trying to make you hopeless, trying to make you helpless. But when you start to praise God, I want to say the chains are broken. Not because that's what you're looking for, but because He is the chain breaker. He is the deliverer. He is the one who sets us free and into destiny. Take your seats again. You spoke about a certain type of church, Julian. And God's liking the sound of it. He's tapping His foot. The earth is shaking. The chains are breaking. The doors are flinging wide, because He inhabits the praises of His people. Something is shifting in the moment. The jailer wakes up. He knows the prison doors are open. He draws his sword because he's about to kill himself, but it's a different sort of midnight hour. It's one that carries a different sort of freedom. And Paul shouts out in the midst of this moment to this man who's tortured him, this man who's caused him pain and agony, and he cries out in a loud voice, it says, and he says, don't harm yourself. We are all here. All of us. And the jailer comes in, it says in some versions, he puts on the lights because it was dark. How did Paul and Silas know these other men were still there? Because there was something of freedom that happened in the prison before the chains came off. It's when the praise went up. Sometimes your freedom comes before the chains come off. It's when you take that posture, that stance in the middle of being surrounded, and you start to give Him praise no matter the hour. I don't know where to go from here. I want Josh to come. I want to sing that last song that we sang at the conference. And the jailer says, what must I do to be saved? His first question. The first words out of his mouth when he sees real believers. You know, your theology is revealed in the midnight hour because it stops being theory and it starts being reality. And he sees something of those that he hated in that moment that has shaken him, that has caused not only him to be saved, but a whole family got to keep their dad. Think about that. And the outworking is that his whole household comes to the Lord because he asked this simple question. He says this, what must I do to be saved? And they respond, believe in the Lord Jesus. Then they spoke the word of the Lord to him and to all the others in his house. And at that hour of the night, the jailer took them and washed their wounds. It's been midnight. You know, the sorrow may last for the night, but joy, the strength of the Lord comes in the morning. Midnight doesn't last forever. It's just a transition moment. How do you posture yourself to come into the joy that God's bringing? And the Lord to him and all the others in the house. And at that hour of the night, the jailer took them and washed their wounds. And then immediately he and all of his household were baptized. The jailer brought them into his house and set a meal before them. And he was filled with joy. Joy comes in the morning. He was filled with joy because he had come to believe in God, he and his whole household. Now we are going to sing a song because maybe you found yourself in that midnight hour a little bit surrounded. You know, there's a passage of scripture where it speaks about Elisha, and his servant was terrified because he came out of the tents and he saw the hosts of the enemy were around him, and he went to Elijah. He was terrified, and Elijah said, open his eyes to see. And his eyes opened, and he saw the hills were filled with even more numerous chariots of fire and angelic host, because greater are them that are for us, greater is he that is for us than that which is against us. And so this song comes from this moment. It says, this is how I fight my battles. This is how I face the midnight hour. This is how I handle myself in the prison. This is what I start to do when people are watching to see if there's a reality about my faith, a robustness. This is how we fight our battles. This is how they sang that first song when we arrived there in the midst of persecution for the rest of the conference. And I'm wanting us to just finish with this song. Can we stand?